at the moment. So I say hello and welcome from the UK to you all. So it's just on lunch, it's a morning for me. I think it's just on lunchtime for you all, isn't it? So I am Mel Ross and I am a modern mindset mentor. What does that mean? How do I translate that into English for you all? Well, essentially what I do is I work with senior leaders and heads of transformation all over the world, private sector and public sector, to help them to challenge their beliefs and to modernize their way of thinking so that they can participate and accelerate transformation. So that's really what my day job is all about, working with leaders to help them to participate in transformation in an active way. So it's from the mindset piece. I also do work with a lot of practitioners, very much similar to each and every one of you on today's call. I work with organizational development, learning and development, change managers, data and tech experts to help them to do something as well, which is to humanize transformation, to humanize projects and programs. So hopeful leadership is something that is very important to me, and at any given moment is something that I talk to every leader about that I am mentoring or group of leaders that I'm working with. So I'm really excited to be talking about this with you all today. One thing that I will say is at the start of my session is there is quite a few slides that I'm going to take you through. So the way that I want you to approach this session is a little bit like info. So I'm sharing information with you, but equally I want to give you some thinking time as well. So in order to start today's session, I would like everybody to just think for a moment about what energy are you bringing into this session right now? So, and please pop it into the chat. So pop into the chat. What energy are you bringing into this session? I'm really excited at the moment. I'm full of high energy, but that might not be the case for all of you. Some of you might feel frustrated because you've just had a really complex meeting that you've come out of to start this session. I've got curiosity coming in. I've got excitement coming in. I've got energy. Hungry. Oh, Ava, you should have brought your lunch with you. I am so sorry. But just share with me that energy. I really want you to just kind of think, get some time to just reset and recalibrate your energy for the next few moments. So that's the first thing I want to do. The next thing I want to do is to ask you a second question. What is the landscape that we are all operating within right now? This world today, the 28th of February, 2024, what is the landscape? What is the environment that we are operating within as change agents? What words, what phrases come up for you? What are some of the words that come up for you? Digitalization, unstable, complexity, constant change, resistance, future, pace, rapid, fast, quick changing. There's so much, isn't there? But what's really interesting is what we're seeing kind of a balance between the technical and the structural side and the human side. And that's really interesting because that is a really good segue into thinking about hope and hopeful leadership. So keep thinking about that and keep popping into the chat what comes up for you in terms of the environment, the landscape that we are all operating in right now. And what I want to do is I want to just start the slides by sharing with you some quite interesting pieces of information. So as always, I'm sure most of you know, at the beginning of a calendar year, we get lots of research, don't we, about trends and predictions for the year ahead. The Edelman Trust Barometer, if you do not already use it, I recommend that each and every one of you does, because it gives a statistical barometer of trust that we should be able to use and use as a piece of value as project managers in our work. 2024 Edelman Trust Barometer has just been released, and these are the key 4 elements. Now, what the narrative of this year is innovation in peril. The narrative in 2023 was polarization. The narrative in 2022 was an all-time low in trust. So all of the words and phrases you put into the chat really resonate to that. But what I want to do is I want to pique your interest on number 4 here. Restoring trust with a promise of innovation. Through the Edelman Trust Barometer research, number 4 has come up as one of the key themes. Give me control over my future. When people feel in control of how innovation and change affects their life, they are more likely to embrace it and not resist it. Listen out for concerns and questions. So active listening is a really key element as well. That's a major trend that's coming out. That speaks to hopeful leadership. The other piece that I want to just share with you as well is the Wunderman Thompson Future 100. Again, an amazing piece of trend and prediction that gets released on an annual basis. They're in the 10th year releasing this research in 2024. 3 macro themes coming up. The great deceleration. People are tired. People are fatigued. Radical reconnection. We want to come together even though we are in a technological age. And rehumanization. Again, those 3 themes, those macro themes, all speak to this concept of hopeful leadership. So what I want to do now is just talk to you about, hope and how we might describe it. So what about the world that we live in right now? And there's 3 ways that we can think, we can describe the world that we live in today. Now, I already saw in the chat one, VUCA, and I'm sure many of you have heard of VUCA. And VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, did you know that VUCA actually was a phrase that was coined in the 1980s within the Cold War? So it was a phrase and a theme to help us to understand the environment, the landscape of its time. Now, in 2020, post-COVID, the phrase Barney was coined. I don't know how many of you have come across this, but if you have in the chat, please let me know. What does Barney mean? Barney is how we are describing the post-2020 landscape and environment. And this is something that is interesting because look at how this changes the game slightly. B stands for brittle. Think about the Edelman Trust that I mentioned, the polarity of 2023. Anxious. Think about how many of us are, grappling with well-being, grappling with self-care, stress and anxiety. Non-linear. I am sure that each and every one of you can tap into that as somebody that is a change agent in the world of projects and programs. And finally, incomprehensible. What does that mean? It means that it's not just one or a few big wicked problems. Even the minutiae of challenges and opportunities that we've got in life and business and projects and programs can bring this sense of incomprehensibility because the amount of data, because the amount of different right answers there might be. So what I do is I talk to leaders about UPoPo. That's what I do. That's what I talk to leaders about. I say, don't talk to VUCA and Barney, talk to UPoPo. And the reason I do that is because I'm a practitioner of hopeful leadership. And UPoPo stands for untapped potential and possibility. So it is more of a forward-looking, a future-looking view rather than trying to solidify where we are now, which can sometimes really increase anxiety and complexity and resistance to change. So there we go. So those are some phrases. So the next thing that I want to do is just clear the water for us all. Let's clear the water. Let's make sure that we're all on level pegging when it comes to definition of hope. So this is the next thing that I want to do. So what I want to do is, first and foremost, is I want to help you understand what hope is not. What hope is not. And you've got a few definitions here that are up on the screen. Hope is not the belief that everything is going to be absolutely dandy and great and fantastic. It is not somebody that just, thinks that it's the sunny side, everything's going to get better narrative. It's not at all. It's grounded in realism. It's grounded in realism. And Maria Popova has actually said, critical thinking without hope is cynicism, but hope without critical thinking is naive. And when I talk about what hope is not, when I'm working with a group of leaders or change agents like yourself, I often talk about narrative because we overuse the word. I don't know about you, but think about the strategies that you might be working on at the moment. Think about the customers and the teams you're working with at the moment. Think about life in general. And think about where you use hope in your normal narrative, in your normal conversation and language. And the key thing is this: we overuse the word. And I want to get back to basics. I want us to use the word when we should be using the word in order to support successful projects and programs. So what do I mean by overusing the word? We use it when it shouldn't be used. How about this? I hope my meeting, sorry, I beg your pardon. I hope that my husband gets home from work today on time. I hope that my husband gets home from work today on time. Now that's not hopeful leadership. Why? Because I am not in control of whether my husband gets home on time or not. When I was recently talking about hopeful leadership in Lisbon with the PMI leadership group, I'd just flown in from Gatwick. When I was in Gatwick, believe it or not, me, myself, even though I'm a practitioner of hopeful leadership, we all get it wrong. There's no such thing as perfect. I sat there and what did I say to myself? I said, I hope my plane arrives in Lisbon, Portugal on time. That's not hope because it was out of my control. However, if I was to say, I hope that my meeting finishes on time today, it's my meeting, it's my agenda, that's different because I am in control of it. So that is hope because it's grounded in realism and I have control. So it's important for us to recognize that hope isn't one of these words that you see on the bottom of this screen: wishful thinking, optimism, dream, and certainly not denial. The next thing for us to navigate, of course, is when there is no hope. What is the opposite to hope? And can I ask you to pop that into the chat, please? What is the opposite to hope? When there is no hope, what is there? Think about your projects and your programs. Think about the way that your clients and customers are talking to you. What is coming up for you? Are they saying we can't do this? Are they saying that will never work here? What are some of the things that they're saying in their narrative? Or the workforce might be saying, even if the leaders are not. When there is no hope, the opposite to hopefulness, of course, is hopelessness. And if you look at the theory and the science behind hopelessness, it actually is defined in the three things that you see here. Somebody unable to see the future, which means that they can't get motivated about it, which then drives the third piece, which is low level of activity. Isn't that interesting when you actually start applying hopeful leadership to projects and programs? Interesting, huh? So the next question that I've got for you all is this. I don't have a slide for this one, but what is hope? What is hope? When you're thinking about hopefulness, what comes up for you? When there is hope, what are you seeing? What are you experiencing? What is the landscape sharing with you? What narrative, what words are you hearing by people that you are working with? Inspiration, promise of better things to come, success. Absolutely. What else comes up for you when you think about hope? Positivity, chance, light, motivation. Absolutely. Can you see that there is a real kind of theme about future? And the second theme is about me, is about energy, is about action, is about movement. So we've got future and we've got movement and energy. So that is very much the theme that speaks to hope and hopeful leadership. So what I'm going to do now, so forgive me, I'm going to take you through a few slides that talk a little bit more about what hope is and introduce you to something called hopeful theory or hope theory. And then what we'll do is we'll look at some benefits and we'll look at some ideas. And if we've got time, Bilal, hopefully if we've got some time, I will also give us an opportunity to go through a little self-assessment, which is called the Adult Hope Scale. But if we've got time, if not, I will share it with you for you to all have a look at. So researchers have absolutely coined hope as one of the most important words to really support leaders, that they're saying that this is one of the key priorities for leaders in 2024. So it's a very, very important word for us to grapple with, to reflect on, and bring into our work as change agents, as leaders of projects and programs. And for anyone on today's call who is thinking that I'm talking about something woolly, I am not. Hope and hopeful theory is backed up by a body of knowledge from research, theory, and science. This is not just me asking you to believe my words. This is something that is absolutely statistically backed. It is something that is real that we ought to be bringing in. So let me talk to you all about hope theory. And hope theory was created and coined by Dr. Charles Schneider in 2022. He was the man that really brought the concept of hope theory a little bit out of positive psychology into the world of business and psychology, coaching and mentoring. So all relevant to us. And this is something that all great leaders instill. They instill hope, something that you should be thinking about how you instill hope in your projects, with your teams, and with your customers. So what does hope theory mean? What does it look like? Well, it rests on three key elements, or what Schneider calls tenets. There are three tenets to hope theory. So great leaders instill these three things. The first thing is an absolute clarity of a future that's brighter than now. Now, you might be thinking, well, we've got that, Mel. I already do that, Mel. Our customers do that. The team do that already, Mel. But the key thing is this. It's not just that there is clarity of a future goal. It is that that future goal, that future orientation is something that is purposeful, more often than not bigger than us. And the second thing, which is far more important, is that everybody can see themselves in it. Everybody that is affected by the project or the program or the change can see themselves in that future. That's what that goal future orientation means. It's not that it's there, it's that people can see themselves in it, which is something that we do a lot in our work called future visualization and future casting workshops with employees and workers, people that are affected by change, helping them to see themselves in that change, to visualize themselves in that change. So that's tenet number one. When we've got that, what happens is something amazing in the neuroscience of who we are as human beings. Amazing. What happens is all of a sudden, people are likely to take agency. What do I mean by that? Exactly what we said in the chat. They are likely to be motivated to take action. They are likely to be motivated to take action for themselves, hence willpower. So if you have the ability to get people to take time and space to visualize themselves in that future, as long as it's clear enough for them to do it, then they will take agency and start engaging with that future. But that's not all. There's three tenets to this theory. There's three tenets to the journey of the behavior that humans take when there is hopeful leadership. And the third piece is pathway. if I can see myself in that future, I am motivated to take action for myself toward that future. And not only that, I will design my own pathway. And what's beautiful is once you design one pathway, you start to design another and another. And what is this? This allows people to see that there's not just one way of getting to the future. There are multiple right answers. There are multiple pathways of getting there. This is hopeful theory. This is what great leaders instill. That's not change management. This is something that we should all have within our practice, hopeful leadership. And the beautiful thing is, over and above that, there's a feedback loop. The more motivated I am, the more action I take, the more likelihood is that I'm going to create more possible pathways, which means that I am de-risking failure, because I can see different ways of working. And once I take one way, if that doesn't work, I can choose another. So failure actually becomes something that I don't necessarily need to focus on because I'm focusing on learning and moving forward. That's hope theory. Now, you all probably want a little bit more context and thinking perhaps now of how do we get that into our own practice, into perhaps our projects and programs? Well, that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about now. And again, forgive me, this is obviously a lunch, learn and lead. So I'm a giver. I'm providing information to you. It would be wonderful if we were able to have a more interactive session to really get into examples and how this might work for you. But of course, as I've said to Bilal before as well, if anybody would like to be in touch with me after today, I would be delighted to talk to you more about this concept. So what does hopeful leadership give the people that are impacted by your projects and your programs, if there is hopeful leadership in play? It gives them direction, faith, and guidance. And do you know what's so beautiful? It's not just in the future or the leader, it's in themselves. Think about Barney that I mentioned earlier on. It's in themselves. They have faith in themselves to take direction and guidance. That's so important for us today in the world that we live in, to instill this, not just for our customers, but also in our teams with so much complexity and so many pressures that we get from customers and leaders to deliver our projects and programs. And the interesting thing is that, hope is so powerful. And I mentioned to you earlier on that it's not just optimism. It's not just seeing and singing the sunny side of the street song every day. It really does have power. It really helps employees to see a way forward. And in orange here on this slide is a very, very interesting quote and statistic that's come from Clifton's Strengths, which is, when asked whether the company's leadership made them feel enthusiastic about the future, of the people that said yes, 69% of the people that said yes were also strongly engaged. Of the people that didn't feel enthusiastic about the future, in terms of how the leaders made them feel, only 1% were engaged. Only 1% were engaged. So making sure that our employees are genuinely trusting and believing the leaders, and the leaders are genuinely helping people to feel enthusiastic about the future, our engagement levels dramatically increase. That's pretty good for project and program success, huh? Hope is not just powerful, hope is also effective, because what it does is it allows people to set goals that are not just on the edge. When there is hopeful leadership, people have got the courage to stretch their goals. They've got the courage to aim higher, even for themselves as individuals, let alone systemically for the project at a macro view. So it's effective because we're going to achieve more. We're more courageous. We're more likely to lean into or experiment with innovation. And innovation at peril, remember what I said, that is something that the Edelman Trust has brought out. Hope is also strategic for those of you that are strategic leaders as well in your day job. It is absolutely strategic. And the reason why I say that is because hope is critical to a successful strategy, because it gives us an understanding of what is highly probable, if not 100% possible. That's strategy, right? What do I say that again? It is critical to successful strategy, because what it does is it allows us to communicate to people what is highly probable, even if we don't know yet if it's 100% possible. And that's the world that we live in with so many of our projects and programs. So, you know, it's really important for us to recognize that. So if you haven't heard of the probability and possibility matrix, then go and have a look at it, because that's something that's absolutely fantastic. Very different to a SWOT analysis, very different completely. Hope is also based on realism, as I mentioned at the start. Hope is something that's based on tangible data. It doesn't rest on the shoulders of wishy-washy assumptions at all. It does require tangible and, qualitative and quantitative data, because that's where trust comes from for so many individuals and leaders. And oh my goodness, it builds resilience. When things do not go wrong, and we all here, I am sure, have got an experience of when things have not necessarily gone according to plan, when there is hopeful leadership and the 3 tenets are in play, people do not feel alone. They feel led. They feel more inspired to create their own pathway to solve a problem. So they don't necessarily rely on the outside world, rely on leaders above them to make decisions or tell them what to do. They take agency. So increased courage and motivation. And finally, determination to achieve goals. I mean, I just think that's brilliant. This is a quote. This is a quote by Michael Mauro, and I just think it's wonderful. And he talks specifically to how hopeful leadership builds resilience within our human systems. And, you know, it does absolutely allow us to create a momentum of change. And that's what we're all here for, right? We are all here to encourage human beings to become and do something different, to evolve. We're all here in some way, shape, or form to do that. And hopeful leadership can support that. It's a core element, a core output of hopeful leadership is forward momentum. As we saw earlier on, as many of you actually put into the chat when I asked you what comes up for you when you think about hope, motivation, moving forward, future orientation, etc., etc. So just bringing hopeful leadership and the concept of hope more into your day-to-day world, what kind of benefits does it bring? Well, some of them I've already mentioned, but very much is what you see here. I mean, these are, who wouldn't want these as benefits of their projects and programs? Increased productivity, resilience when things don't go according to plan. Number 3 here, the democratization of leadership is really important. What does that mean? It means that if people take self-agency, that people are able to take self-agency, able to take ownership of their own future, follow their own paths, build courage and motivation when there's probably such low trust and stress and anxiety and complexity around well-being. The other thing that it does, and thinking about the projects and programs that you're working on, hopeful leadership also dramatically closes the gap between the leaders and the rest of the organization. I don't know what projects and programs you are individually or collectively working on at the moment, but I wonder if you were to think about the leaders in the change program and the human system, generally speaking, the wider organization, are those 2 things lock and key? Are they connected? Are they coherent? Or is there a gap between the two? Hopeful leadership is something that can help you there. You, as a hopeful leader, as well as encouraging hopeful leadership within the leaders of your project and your program. And oh my goodness, is hopeful leadership contagious? Because one of the most important elements of it is positive psychology, is gratitude, is reframing language. It's not about that we can't, it's about how can we? It's not about but, yes, but, it's about yes, and. So it's really important for us to recognize as well that it is contagious because it has this positive relational energetics around it. And by the way, again, don't worry, it's not me going woolly. Positive relational energetics has been around for a couple of decades and is scientifically proven through the University of Michigan, and something that is taught to leaders all over the world, positive relational energy. And it's so core to hopeful leadership. So what about your hopeful leadership? What about you as a hopeful leadership? Where do you even start with this? Well, the one thing that I want you to recognize is that hope is not a tap. Hope is not something that you switch on or switch off. It is not something that is tangible as an asset that you have got. It is not a skill. It is not something that you do. It is who you are. It is a practice. Hopeful leadership is ultimately about your value system and your belief in yourself first before the strategy that drives your project and program. So you have to think about your belief system and your thoughts. You have to think about who you are and how you show up in the system. I know that everybody here is a member of the amazing PMI community. So what I've done here, hopefully, is show you how the concept of developing hopeful leadership in yourself, first and foremost, even before thinking about bringing it to leaders in projects and programs that you're working with, is really important for you as a PMI member. Because what you see here are some of the things that we help change agents like yourself and senior leaders to start to design into their practice. You've got to be hopeful about your own future. You've got to be hopeful about your own future. And that's a really tough thing for me to say today. You know, in the world that we live in, with some of the, big macro forces that are at play, with, socioeconomic pressures and, political unrest, etc., etc. But you've got to own your own future. That's the first piece. We have to be role models, each and every one of us, me and everyone here on this call. We have to role model tiny little elements of the future in our practice to give a glimmer of light of the future to the people that are impacted by our projects and our programs, because that will give agency. So we're going to make it easy for them. To make it easy, one of your PMI values, role model. It doesn't matter how disconnected you might feel you are to the project. It might be, a complex technical architecture project, but there are some principles about that project that you could bring into your ways of working to help light some of those fires in the people that are impacted by it. The reframing of positive language, as I'd mentioned earlier on, is so important, and that brings a sense of welcoming, doesn't it? How many times have you walked into a meeting where somebody is gruff and they're really negative? There's nothing welcoming there. But when we've got strong positive language and energy, we are attractive to others. And I don't necessarily mean in the sexual content, I mean in the human connection, a sense of belonging. Positive relational energy, the attraction to others. Strategic patience is something really interesting. I don't know whether you've ever heard about strategic patience, but practicing strategic patience is really important. I am a lecturer in strategic management here in the UK, and so often with the people that are on my courses, there's this real drive to get to the end of the game. We've got to get there as fast as we possibly can. But the thing is, processes and technology and structure is not what you focus on. You might want to get there fast with them, but you've got a human curve of change as well that you have to deal with. So strategic patience is something very, very important. And that embraces curiosity, but it means that you lead with calmness. You lead with calmness. And the final one that I want to mention to you is your courage compass. And what does that mean? It basically means your higher purpose. So you're always going to aim higher. You're always going to look at succession. You're always going to look at what is beyond. For any project and program's end date, that's not where the project and program ends. And we all know that, don't we? It's the legacy. It's the impact beyond that. It's the evolution. It's what we leave behind for people themselves to continue to evolve when our project has long finished. It's so incredibly important. And hopefully you can start to see, and I say hopefully, you can start to see the power of Hope for Leadership and the possibility and potential of it to support you yourself, your own psychological well-being and self-care, as well as the projects that you're working on, as well as the customers that you are working with. So thinking about less you and thinking about the project itself that you might be working on, what are some of the things that you can do in order to consider maybe hopeful project management? And this is just something that I'm playing around with at the moment. So if anybody would like to come and work with me on this, I would love PMI to really start thinking about hopeful project management for 2024 and beyond, especially thinking about, you know, the world that we're living in now with responsible and generative AI and the ethical side of, you know, human versus machine. So there's, you know, 7 elements here that I would really like you all to consider. We don't necessarily have time to go through each and every one of them today, but some of them you can see that are repeated based on what I've just said before. Realism, pathway, not. It's not one single solution. Pathway is not the word, it's pathways. It's plural. Number 2 is about how many right answers are there for this, not where is the right answer. Belonging is another one that I would call out, really getting people to have a sense of belonging in the project's future, in the project's aim, in the project's goal, seeing themselves in that future. That's giving them hope. That will give them a sense of agency and willpower. And the final one that I will just bring out, which is important to me as well, and you know, those of you that have heard me speak before about modern mindset and modern leadership in business and work will have heard this before. Small is beautiful. When it comes to human beings, when it comes to change from a human perspective, small is your friend. Small does not mean slow. The human curve of change is a J curve. So it needs to be small enough that we can repeat it, and then eventually to make it a routine. And if we can create routined ways of working, we have the ability to create habits. And only when you get to a point of a habit shift do you get to the point of an identity shift, which is who we are becoming. Because every human being impacted by your projects and programs ideally is becoming someone different as a result of your project and program. So it's not what they need to do, it's who are they becoming as a result of. And hopeful leadership, hopeful project management, I believe are 2 considerations, 2 very, very, very strong considerations for you to take into your own practice and work. Now, I know that we're coming up to time because Bilal, you mentioned that it would be great for us to have some time for some Q&A, but I do have a little assessment here which is called the Adult Hope Scale. Let me just maybe just take you to the end of the slides, and if we've got time, we can come back to this. If not, I will share it with Bilal so that he can actually send it out to all of you. But the Adult Hope Scale assessment helps you to understand how hopeful you are in this moment for this project, for this stage of the project right now. And it takes you through 12 questions. And I use the Adult Hope Scale very often when I'm working on different projects, when I'm on different client sites. I take myself through the Adult Hope Scale assessment really quickly. It only takes me about 3 or 4 minutes, but it gives me a deep internal understanding of how I'm feeling about that particular moment, that particular challenge, that particular client, that particular stage of the project. So it's not just something that you do once. It's not a psychometric profiling test. It's something that you can do as and when there is something happening, you know, in particular when something unexpected is happening. So let's see if we might even be able to come back to that. But I guess the biggest thing that I want to do today is, and I know it's been a whistle-stop tour. I know I've introduced you to something and thrown loads of slides at you and thoughts and thoughts. But what I would like to do is I would like you to kind of think about, there's definitely one person on this call that you know. There's definitely another PMI member across Hungary that you know. What would happen if you connected with that one person, or even more than one person, and thought about these 3 things that are on the slide? What tiny action could you take in order to bring hopeful leadership into your own practice or into your projects? What tiny thing could you communicate with others to add value around this, to bring the concept of this to others, to maybe open their eyes? And also, what tiny thing about what I've just been talking about in the last 40 minutes or so is just piqued your interest enough that you want to explore more and go deeper? Action, communicate, and explore. And that's what I call ACE Your Learning. And that tiny little technique can create so much impact when you're in self-development situations. Tiny action to move forward, a communication so that you're sharing with others and socializing and exploring some curiosity to go deeper. So bang on 1:45. I was hoping that I would get there so that we could have perhaps 1 or 2 questions or thoughts. It doesn't have to be a question. Maybe it's just a thought that you have. So in order to do that, I encourage you and I challenge you all to consider your own hopeful leadership. And I'll leave you with this beautiful quote from John Maxwell. Hopeful leaders dig for gold while others dig for dirt. Hopeful leaders live out good values while others live out their emotions. Hopeful leaders will build a bridge while others try to burn them. And hopeful leaders have got the courage to tell the truth when others can manipulate it. And on the right-hand side is just my QR code for my LinkedIn profile. If anything that I've talked about today is of interest to you and has motivated you to take agency and action, who knows? I'll stop sharing from this point. And Bilal, I will come back to you maybe to see whether there's any thoughts or some questions.
Thank you, Mel. Actually, it was very tough provoking, and for me, it was also I came a lot of ideas in while you were speaking, and one of my first question, and I really encourage everybody, just please post your questions into the chat. My first question is that, is there a way that somebody can develop the hopeful thinking? So what is the best thing to for somebody who is more like desperate or do not have the hope in the future, or everything that we have discussed can help or can develop?
Yeah, and that's really important, because you know there might be some people on the call that might feel a little bit hopeless in terms of where they're at right now. Yes, you can develop hopefulness. Yes, you can develop hopeful leadership, Bilal, without question. The first thing that you need to do is you need to engage in hopefulness for yourself and your own future. So it starts from the inside out. What I normally do when I work with leaders is I take them through 3 key elements. The first thing I do is I take them through a values assessment. So we all have values that we hold dear to us, and we live our life based on our values. But how many of you have really spent time to consider what your values are? because your values are your most important decision-making framework. So a values assessment is the first thing that I help with people on. The second thing is just to understand the level of positive energy, and you can take a positive a PQ, a positive intelligence assessment, which is only a few minutes. And if anybody would like to do that, let me know and I will send you the link. But it's just understanding, is your cup half full or half empty? Because you might believe that your cup is half full. But the interesting thing is when you actually go through the assessment, it might show you that something otherwise, as will the values assessment. So those are two things that I do. And then once I understand that, then what I do is I work with somebody to really understand their future. And I don't know about people that are on the call today, but what is interesting is, most of my day I'm working with senior leaders on modern mindset theory, and of course hopeful leadership comes in. Do you know the amount of leaders that can't see a future for themselves? When I ask them, what's your biggest ambition in life? What's your dream? What's your moonshot? What's your North Star? What's your Switzerland? They can't tell me, Bilal. They can't tell me because they're so forced into the moment of now that they've lost sight of their own future, which is their own compass. Yeah, their own compass. So that once you've got that, developing hopeful leadership, as you can see in some of the things that I've shared in the slide, just becomes a design pathway, a development pathway. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the meantime, there is a question from Melinda Shardy. The leaders who realize the need for change for the organization, but might not realize the change in themselves, that is the need for hopeful leadership. How would you start to engage with them and possibly turn their mindset?
Oh my gosh. There is no one single answer to that. But I think, yeah, I mean, that is my day job. That's exactly what I do. So it's really interesting. I could stay here, Melinda, for hours talking to you about different techniques and ways that you might be able to establish that. But what is really interesting is that, there's a few things that you might want to think about here. So the first thing is start observing the narrative of the leaders and just listen to them. And what you'll start to notice two things possibly happening. The first thing is that their narrative tends to be what we need to do, what we need to deliver as a system, what we need to achieve as an organization. So it's very much what we need to do. So that's the first thing that you notice. And if that's the case, what you're recognizing is that they've disconnected themselves. So that's one indicator of dissonance, disconnection. So what you want to do is you want to just bring that, and who do you need to be in order to deliver that? So it's kind of project management coaching. Who do you need to be? Who do we need to be in order to deliver that? And if you keep bringing back the narrative of what we need to do to, and who do we need to be in order to deliver that, you'll start to bring their narrative through. The other thing is when you notice that the leaders talk about them and us, that's another indication. So observe these things, because those are two big disconnects. If the leaders are talking about them and us as two separate things, that's something else that you want to notice, and that's another starting point. And what I often do with leaders there is I just say, how are you evidencing elements of the change vision, the vision of change, the strategy? How are you evidencing that in the tiny moments of your day? How might you be able to do that? So those are two things that I always start off with. But also, I think the really important piece is helping leaders to have space that is safe for them to speak their own truth. Honestly, Melinda, that for me is really important. So few leaders speak the truth in the leadership room. So few. And 80% of strategic management, strategic execution failure is down to lack of trust in the boardroom or the leadership room. So one of the things that's really important is just creating space for conversations that are safe for individuals to be able to speak their truth. And that's something that I've just worked on now with government here in the UK, well, actually in Northern Ireland. And we set some very specific pockets of safe pockets for conversation, specifically driven with an output and an objective to get the leader to understand how they are evidencing the vision in their own practice, how they're role modeling it. I know I've just given you two things there, Melinda. I hope that has helped somewhat, but there's so many different things that we can do. You know, really important.
Thank you. We have another question from Gabor. Gabor Kertész, do you think we humans getting stupider because of AI phones? I mean, we lose our capabilities to dream big, to have a dream at the end. We are explorers and adventurers. So how you try to develop any attitude to transform or inject any dream where there is no dream?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Wow. That's bordering on a philosophical question. And I love it. Gabor, I love it. I celebrate the fact that you've asked that question. Gosh, do you know, there's two schools of thought here. I think that there is a groundswell of awakening where people are starting to recognize that who we are as human beings is really important. So there's kind of some existential, you know, thinking going on for a lot of people there. We are becoming mindful. And if we're becoming mindful, that means that we're opening up our thinking and our consciousness to things bigger than just the shiny light, you know, the materialistic world, the capitalist world. So there's a definite groundswell there. But equally, what is interesting that's happening, Gabor, and you can see in a lot of research, is that there's two elements of relaxation. So there's passive relaxation and active relaxation. And what we're noticing is that there is a propensity for people at the end of the day, at the end of the week, when they're on holiday, is to go for passive relaxation. And that's basically, oh, I've had a really tough day. I'm going to sit in front of Netflix and watch a movie because I need to relax. What that is doing is absolutely talking to what you're saying. It's not necessarily making us stupid, but what it is doing is it's not exercising our brains. It's not exercising our neural pathways. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So that's really important. So we advocate passive relaxation. Passive relaxation is listening to music, is reading a book, is having a conversation with somebody instead of putting the TV on. It's going for a walk and not, you know, always listening to Audible, or, you know, just actually looking at the trees and smelling and, you know, thinking about your five senses. So it's really, really important for us to recognize that. And I think the other thing as well is that, oh, Gabor, I have never worked with an organization yet that future visualization has been a mandatory element for every human being to explore, for people to explore their future as part of their self-development pathway, as part of their learning and development, as part of performance management. And yet I think we need it. So we are still explorers. We are still adventurers. Nothing has changed. What has changed is that we as human beings, and you might see this in your projects and your programs, you know, Roger Allen in 2006 said this when he talked about the ladder of accountability. There are two types of people. There are the people that believe that life happens as a result of the outside world. So they live their life thinking that the outside world is in control. And there are those that live their life knowing that they are in control of it. It's not the outside world. I am in control and I have a choice. And I think that's something that we've seen a shift in, and you notice that a lot in psychology papers. Again, I could talk to you, Gabor, so much on that subject, but hopefully there's just a few little nuggets in there to support some form of answer for you. That's valuable.
Thank you, Mel. while we have a couple of minutes left and before we are waiting for the last question, let me just start the poll we have. It is in Hungarian and it is about the event. What is the opinion of the people who are now in the event? So just a second, I'm going to launch it. So please feel free to fill with your thoughts.
No worries.
Okay, so this has been launched. Thank you everybody who is filling it. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left. If anybody have any other questions to Mel, just feel free to post in the chat. Otherwise, I think that she's going to answer the questions later on. So if there are any that you didn't have the opportunity to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, just listening to just thinking about Gabor's question as well. I mean, AI, right? We're all talking about AI. You know, is it going to take over the world? And I think for me, because I'm working on what does an AI mindset look like for a leader, and training leaders to develop an AI mindset. And there's a few things for me that are really important. It's not to think about it as AI in terms of artificial intelligence, but to think about it as another intelligence. Just think about it as another intelligence. And that changes the game. It just slightly shifts it. And then never speak about AI, only ever speak about responsible AI. Because the more we repeat responsible AI instead of just saying AI, the more that embeds in other people's consciousness. So we want them to be thinking responsible AI, responsible AI, responsible AI. So repeating that. And I guess the final thing, as you're all filling out your poll, is that so many people just run towards AI is going to replace my job, AI is going to replace my role. But actually, we as project managers need to be thinking about enhancement before replacement. How does AI enhance before we think about replace? And unless the replacement is the inefficient work, which is transactional, tactical, repetitive work. So those are three things that I often talk to leaders about when they're wanting to develop, you know, an AI mindset within their organization. There we go.
Thank you, Mel. Great. So I don't see other questions. I saw a lot of thank you notices. So it was indeed a great 1 hour. Thank you again for taking the time and to spend this 1 hour with us. It was really inspiring and it was great. So again, if everybody has any question afterwards, please let me know and I will forward the question to Mel. Thank you. Wish everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. And please do, if there's something that you'd like to know more, get in touch with Bilal. I'm absolutely, you know, more than happy to have a chat.
Thank you. Have a nice one. Bye-bye.
You take care. Bye-bye.